morning, brothers.
Good morning.
This is from our Capuchin Constitutions of 2012, Chapter 3, Our Life of Prayer. Mental prayer is the spiritual teacher of the brothers who, if they are true and spiritual lesser brothers, pray interiorly at all times. To pray, in fact, is nothing other than to speak to God with the heart. In truth, whoever speaks to God with his lips alone does not pray at all. For this reason, each brother applies himself to mental prayer or contemplation, and according to the teaching of Christ, the best of teachers, endeavors to adore the Eternal Father in spirit and truth, striving earnestly to enlighten the mind and enkindle the heart, rather than to formulate words. This was a pretty challenging passage to me as I looked at it, thinking about reflections in the Advent season, preparing our minds and our hearts. Things stood out here. Am I being a true and spiritual lesser brother who prays interiorly at all times? Am I speaking to God with my heart or my lips alone? Am I adoring the Eternal Father in spirit and truth, striving earnestly to enlighten the mind and enkindle my heart? Or am I just going through the motions, caught up in my head, thinking of all the plans that I have, things I have to get done? Reflecting further, I found that the essence of this passage, it's about the heart. Speaking to God with the heart, enkindling the heart. The passages that are referenced in this passage, biblical passages, are Isaiah 29:13. Since this people draws near with words only and honors me with their lips alone, though their hearts are far from me, and their reverence for me has become routine observance of the precepts of men. It's also referenced in Matthew and Mark, Isaiah passage. This people honors me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. Jesus is speaking to the Pharisees. And then in John 4:23, but the hour is coming and is now here when true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. And indeed, the Father seeks such people to worship him. The footnote there referenced that this is not a reference to an interior worship within one's own spirit, but the spirit that is given by God that reveals truth and enables one to worship God appropriately. Given by God. So we begin to see a path that begins with the heart. It caused me to reflect on where I've learned about mental prayer and how it's been sort of taught to me through these past couple of years. And this book that was given to us, Time for God, by our provincial David Domanski on his visitation to novitiate last year, was a big influence on me. And I looked back at it, so the first line, I have to share this with you. Chapter 1, Section 1. Mental prayer is not a kind of Christian yoga. Very fitting. Thank you, David, for being timely with whether you realize it or not. And we have this new space upstairs on the 4th floor that we've cleaned out, prepared for exercise and yoga stretching, but that's not what this prayer is about. It's not about contorting ourselves or thinking our way. Mental prayer is not a technique, but a grace. It's a gift from God that we receive. So I want to share a couple passages from here that stuck out for me, and a couple saints that I admire. St. Teresa of Avila says, where do we begin with mental prayer? How do we prepare ourselves? She says, the whole edifice of prayer is founded upon humility, on the conviction that of ourselves we can do nothing, and it is God, and He alone, who can produce good in our souls. Pride may make this idea distasteful to us, but in fact, it is enormously liberating. God, who loves us, will carry us infinitely further and higher than we could ever get on our own steam. As I think about, as I come to prayer and again reflect on where's my head, all our plans, our worries, our struggles, everything that we bring here is challenging to our prayer. And as we sit and we adore the Lord, these things kind of surface up and they can distract us. But the opportunity here in this humility that Teresa's talking about, it's sort of a right sizing and a right shaping that the Lord brings. We can bring those struggles, those challenges that we can get so consumed with, and when we bring them to Him in prayer, to the one who can produce good in our souls, that's how they can get transformed into that sort of right place in our hearts and our minds. So by being present to Him. And by doing this, with that right sizing, that right shaping, we make room in ourselves, and we make room in our hearts to receive that gift. So I believe that's the humility that Teresa's talking about. Therese of Lisieux, another great example for me, takes us further, and this idea of preparing ourselves. She says, to love is to give everything and to give oneself. A telling incident in her life sheds light on the primacy of love. Shortly before she died, when she was gravely ill and confined to bed, her sister, Mother Agnes, came into the room and asked, "What are you thinking about?" She said, "I'm not thinking about anything. I'm in too much pain, so I pray." Mother Agnes persisted, "And what do you say to Jesus?" Therese said, "I don't say anything. I just love him." Jacques Philippe comments, "This is the poorest and deepest kind of prayer, a simple act of love beyond words and thoughts." The closer prayer comes to that simple act of love, the more it is worth. Is this what it means to speak to God with the heart? How often are we thinking with our hearts the love that we have for Him? Advent is a time to prepare our minds and our hearts for the coming of the Lord. One more passage I wanted to share with you is one that came up this Monday in our Office of Readings, speaking Charles Borromeo about Advent preparation. And the church asks us to understand that Christ, who came once in the flesh, is prepared to come again. We talked about those three comings of Christ, and the one that's in the middle where He can come again. When we remove all the obstacles to His presence, He will come at any hour, at any moment, to dwell spiritually in our hearts, bringing with Him the riches of His grace. So we sit here and we contemplate, we allow His space, we receive His gift, and then that's what allows us, as Father Bob shared with us on Monday, to go out like Francis on his donkey and bring that love to the world. But it has to start with that heart. And very fitting again last night as we were talking about peace and justice. Father Paul brought up that importance of cultivating that peace in our hearts. And that's what can propel us forward. So again, brothers, just emphasizing